Modern technological routing exists alongside a measurable, population-level crisis of cognitive capacity. We are exhausted, constantly scrolling, struggling to sustain even a single coherent thought. Historically, the depth of human reflexive thought tracks with a specific physical metric, the energy return on energy invested, or EROI. This chart shows the net energy cliff. It maps EROI against the fraction of gross energy actually available to society after extraction costs. The formula determines exactly how much surplus remains to build the physical world. Look at the long, flat tail on the right. When the energy return is above 10-1, a civilization captures almost all the gross energy it extracts. This is the zone of massive abundance. As the return drops, the math turns hostile. At a ratio of 5-1, the fraction of energy required simply to maintain the energy system itself begins to spike exponentially. In the 1930s, the return on conventional oil peaked around 50-1. That surplus built the modern world. Today, global fossil fuels at the useful stage have dropped to exactly 3.5-1. We have already plunged well past the survival threshold and deep into the cliff. On this steep slope, small drops in the ratio equal absolute catastrophic starvation for all downstream civilizational systems. Headline gross production numbers continue to rise, creating an illusion of growth. But the net usable energy, the energy left over for society, is quietly collapsing. The International Energy Agency describes this structural trap as the Red Queen syndrome. The system must run exponentially faster simply to stand still. The 2025 financial data shows the scale of this trap. Nearly 90. If investment paused for 12 months, tight oil and shale gas production would instantly collapse by more than 35%. This trap extends beyond fossil fuels to dictate our foundational biological system, global agriculture. Modern human caloric production has inverted. The global agrofood system operates at a 0.91 ratio. We burn more energy growing, processing, and transporting food than it contains. The physical infrastructure required to separate energy extraction from energy return is aggressively cannibalizing total output. The material floor beneath civilization is dropping. This dropping material floor threatens how we think. There is standard, reactive processing, detecting a stimulus and responding. And then there is reflexive cognition, the fluid reasoning and sustained attention required to observe and modify your own thoughts. Reflexive thought is metabolically and temporally expensive. It requires the brain to maintain multiple mental models simultaneously and distance itself from immediate survival needs. A single brain cannot sustain this at scale. Human cognitive depth relies on institutional scaffolding, physical, energy-heavy structures like universities, archives, and systemic discretionary time. Throughout deep history, a physical law governs this capacity. Scaffolding can only be built when a society commands an energy surplus that is highly extractable. Early agricultural societies produced grain, which was visible, storable, and easily taxed. That specific, extractable surplus directly funded the first scribes, administrators, and physical accounting systems. Centuries later, the transition from wood to coal generated a massive new energy surplus. That surplus directly funded the steam-powered printing press, compulsory education, and the heavy institutional architecture of the scientific revolution. Discretionary time and deep-thinking institutions are not natural human endowments. They are temporary structures entirely dependent on high-yield energy extraction. If the global energy return is collapsing, societies will quietly defund this expensive physical scaffolding. The data shows this triggers a highly specific collapse in cognitive capacity. Psychometry divides intelligence into two branches: fluid, for novel problem-solving, and crystallized, for stored facts. Under energy decline, crystallized knowledge remains stable, but fluid intelligence is collapsing. Scandinavian data shows the reverse Flynn effect, a sharp drop in abstract reasoning since 1975. This fracture targets the G factor, the underlying metric that binds all cognitive abilities into a coherent intellect. Recent data proves the G factor itself is fragmenting. The fundamental architecture binding the human mind is unbinding. The foundational, integrative capacity of the human mind is globally degrading because the energy-hungry physical institutions that supported it are being starved. Past civilizational energy declines, like the fall of Rome, resulted in a failure of physical scaffolding. We call this Regime 2, where complexity degrades. A digital compensatory infrastructure has replaced our lost physical scaffolding, one designed to actively extract cognitive capacity. We have entered Regime 3. This creates negative cognitive EROI. Each cycle of engagement with digital platforms costs the brain more metabolic resources than it yields in understanding. The digital trap. Over-harvesting degraded information drives dopamine downregulation and attention residue, creating a constant cognitive deficit. This impacts the default mode network, the brain's self-reflection system. Scaffolding collapse forces this network into pathological hyperconnectivity, running in a consumptive mode clinically defined as rumination. Reflexive thought has inverted. The brain's self-observing machinery now runs consumptively, generating extreme effort while yielding nothing. Digital platforms serve as cheap, extractive substitutes for the physical institutions we can no longer afford to power. Researchers often blame this cognitive decline on excessive screen time, ultra-processed foods, or invisible microplastics. Those hypotheses are downstream symptoms of the EROI constraint. Declining net energy forces society to substitute expensive physical inputs with cheap, high-throughput alternatives across every sector. The process is irreversible. Foundational substrates, topsoil, aquifers, high-grade ores, regenerate on geological timescales, but we consume them on industrial ones. This presents a paradox, the reflexive trap. Recognizing, modeling, and surviving this civilizational descent requires exactly the kind of fluid intelligence and deep integrative capacity that is currently collapsing. The population's diminishing capacity to comprehend the energy problem is not an accident. It is the final, inescapable consequence of the energy constraint consuming its own cognitive substrate.